This semester, I studied abroad in Paris, Cape Town, and Rome. From these cities, I had the opportunity to travel across Europe and southern Africa. Exploring different cultures and landscapes helped me to learn a lot about myself and what I truly appreciate in the world. I realized my love of nature and how grounding natural experiences are. I also began to notice how different countries capitalize on their natural wonders as a source of revenue through the tourism industry. This includes everything from placing expensive restaurants by nice beaches, to entry fees for national parks, to tour guide companies. This presentation shows some of my favorite beautiful locations and emphasizes how my love for these spots contributed to the tourism industry. For starters, my time abroad managed to thwart my fear of heights. First, I was able to skydive while in Cape Town. This was both one of my favorite and most expensive memories. My flight guide informed me that he made more money jumping out of planes with tourists than he ever did working full time as an EMT. To keep challenging my fear, I stopped at the tallest bungee jumping bridge in the world while on the garden route in Cape Town. The garden route is a piece of the southeast coast of South Africa that combines some of the country's most beautiful landscape and activities for tourists and locals to indulge on. My friends and I joked that this was the biggest example of groupthink because none of us wanted to jump off the bridge, but we all did because we didn't want to be the one to not do it. When I was living in Rome, I met up with some friends in Interlaken, which is the epitome of a town built around natural tourism. All the locals seem to actually live in nearby towns like Thun. I told my flight guide I thought it was funny that I'd started conquering my fear of heights with skydiving, to which he informed me that paragliding is more about the art of flying and trying to stay in the air. Although this experience was freezing, I think it was my favorite view of the whole semester. I can see why the city profits so much off of tourism. It was more than worth the expensive Swiss francs spent for the many cups of Swiss hot chocolate from the funky chocolate factory and snacks while walking the beautiful trails. Speaking of trails, one of my absolute favorites of the semester was called Skeleton's Gorge. To access it, you have to pay entry to the Kirstenbosch Botanical Gardens and then hike up a really steep trail. We actually made a lot of friends on the trail. Everyone was so friendly and cheering us on or out of breath, trying to make conversation with us. Hypothetically, you can make it up to Table Mountain, but we were way too tired for that. Instead, my best friend in Cape Town and I just read our books by this crazy red water to mentally prepare for the walk down. This was on my last day in Cape Town, so we ended up running around like crazy people screaming about how much we loved everything about this place. Halfway down the mountain, we decided to go to a hot yoga class after our favorite studio, which was a terrible idea. So we sped down to have time to explore the botanical gardens. My absolute favorite part was this tree canopy bridge that gives a view of the whole gardens. The garden's like an amusement park of plants. They even have a section of plants that just smell really good. I think my most problematic hike was up Devil's Peak to Woodstock Cave. Um, Woodstock is it looks like this, essentially. Like it's all dark because it's so thin and you can just see. We made the mistake of trying to follow Google Maps to find it, which ended up in us scaling a mountain up to this little house that I swear was haunted, running away from it, and ending up on top of the cave. From there, we were going to give up, but we ended up seeing some people on our way down that pointed us in the right direction. Long story short, I got so excited when I saw it in the distance that I tripped and hugged a thorn bush to stay on the mountain. Another highlight was when my dad visited me in Cape Town. He stayed in Camps Bay, which is where you can see this beautiful sunset. It's just this area lined with very expensive restaurants and really capitalizing on the tourism of the space. My dad's visit reminded me how much everything in South Africa was catered to tourism. Like when we went to the Kila Game Reserve, which consisted of an incredibly luxurious hotel and spa with tours that took us to see strategically placed animals that mimic a safari. The tour was a lot of stopping for a lot of pictures, like the zebra in this one. In general, reserves profited off the animals they protected. While on the garden route, we stopped at the Nisna Elephant Sanctuary and paid an entry fee for buckets and to enter with vegetables to spend a morning feeding and playing with the elephants. We picked an ethical sanctuary to visit, and it was amazing. But I will say, you could tell that it was staged. Another species companies profit off of are sharks. I didn't know what to expect when we went shark cage diving, and I did feel weird about the environmental ethicality of it. Essentially, we got on the boat in wetsuits, drove out, they put us in a cage, would bait the sharks to our cage like you see in this picture. It was very cool. It was just another example of the staged wilderness experience. CIE took my group to two of the Cape's biggest attractions. Boulder's Beach, as you can see, is this amazing beach just covered in penguins, which was actually the coolest thing. There were penguins everywhere on the beach, in the bushes, in the water we were swimming in. After they took us to this, which was my favorite. They took us to the Cape of Good Hope, which is what initially people thought was the southernmost point of actual Africa. It's actually Cape Agulhas. The baboons were the wildest part of the experience. Our guide had to warn us 5 times not to hold any food because the baboons will actually attack you to eat it. It was cool to be there, but it was far too windy. My favorite trip of the entire semester was to Namibia, a country of only 8 million inhabitants. After landing in the relatively small capital, we were just struck by the vast desert lands and very little else there. Tourism is a huge contributor to the economy, our tour guide informed us. In our 5-hour drive to the Sesefle Desert, all we saw was sand, the occasional tourist in a small town, and stops set up for the tourists, like the world's best apple pie store that we stopped at twice. We woke up on our second day for a sunrise to hike Dune 45, which is what you see there. The sunrise made the sand orange, and we sat at the top just in shock by both how hard it is to hike in sand and how beautiful it was. After we sprinted down the side of the dune, our tour guide took us to Deadfleet, which is what you see there, which actually just looks like a bolt of lightning wiped everything out forever and just left dunes around it. We cartwheeled across it and pretended like we were on Mars. The last travel I will share with you is that of my boat ride around the island of Capri. I have never seen more beautiful blue water, and the rock formations are crazy. I noticed this exact rock as the generic MacBook background on someone's computer today, and wasn't really surprised that this was the location they took the image from.